Hi, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Scott. Great start with Sapphire. It's always good to hear some American voices just to lift up the energy, and then you get the English-speaking local person come in and lower the tone. So I'll try and keep the energy up until the break. So a few slides to go through. I'll try to keep it to about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll allow some time for questions. So just something out from our review of the wholesale market business. It's important that when we talk about digital and working with fintechs as well, that we understand the business side. I think sometimes that gets neglected and we get consumed by technology and words that people don't really understand. So I'm not going to read all of that, but I think the clear focus for SocGen, for those who don't know it, is we are a European bank, so we want to remain and intend to continue on our path to be a tier one top 5 European bank. That's our kind of target, and that's our focus. The strengths, which is what I'll allude to and cover during the session today, are our ability to be client-centric. And everybody says that about being client-centric. All the banks say they want to be client-centric. And what that means for us is that we have some very deep level relationships based on our legacy of work with clients, particularly in our equity derivative space and the global markets franchise that we have in that. We're very strong in that space. My background is structured products as well as equity derivatives, so I know that space very well. We built out the first retail and B2B platform at ABN AMRO before I did a similar thing here at SG. And that's a key franchise for SG. Integrated, what does that mean? Integrated means not just integrating how we talk to our clients as one voice, but offering a lot of different services, so from transactional banking, global markets, financing, security services, being able to offer that to our clients and meeting those needs as one face to the client. Again, it sounds obvious, but it's quite difficult to do, and lots of people have challenges with that. And coming from a French bank, or being in a French bank, my background is mathematics and manufacturing, we've got a very smart engineering mindset and how we approach things. It's always about solutions, and that's how we work in my team. We're looking at what's the problem, what's the issue, what's the opportunity, how do we provide a solution around that? And that follows very well with our digital strategy. So again, I'm not going to go through all of those. It's all available on the investor relations website if you wanted to know more. 3 areas again that I'll talk about during the session today. It's pretty straightforward again. Business growth, generate business growth, look at new markets, look at opportunities where we're at and how we can enhance those markets and generate revenue. Efficiency is another place. We've had Sapphire before talking about pre-trade. That's obviously an area that we've been looking at from pre to post-trade in the global market space. So using tools like data, AI, and how we can improve that. And also changing our model, how we do things. And then harnessing, this is quite important for us as well from an engineering background and our ability to innovate. And that's really looking at harnessing upcoming disruption. And I'll talk more around that in a bit. So we had some comments around blockchain. We're also looking at digital assets and digital tokenization and seeing how that might change the market and what that might mean from a client perspective. So that gives you the kind of picture as to what we're trying to do. Reason why I put this one up is we all know the metaphors for banks, super tankers, speedboats. You've seen all the pictures that people have come up with, other presentations around digital transformation. We all knew about what happened with the Evergreen supertanker in the Suez Canal, if you weren't aware of that, but that was quite a big news in March. It was nice to have something not related to COVID, but somehow they were able to link something to COVID around that. And I think the analogy here that I'd like to bring here is that within this space, we talk about supertankers, yachts, catamarans. I've never been on one, so I have no idea what it's like to be on one. Containers, dockers, and all these sort of terms that we hear, and they fit in well with digital transformation, cloud, AI, data, and I thought this analogy was quite interesting because we sometimes forget within the organizations that we're in, we have people and partnerships already in place where we leverage off them and their knowledge to help us solve problems. So going back to the solution-driven approach. So in this scenario, it needed people who understood the canal. So think of that as what we talk about rails. So they understood the canal and how that's built. They had people who knew how to dig and get tugs to move that, but they also thought, well, how do we lighten the load to make that ship move again or move it around? So you had to move some of those containers. So that kind of references, again, things that we hear about all the time, but putting that in the context of a real-life scenario, and also where banks are now and where banks have moved in terms of that digital transformation journey. So how do we achieve that within SG and SG Markets? So I forgot to mention, SG Markets is our business-to-business digital platform, and that encompasses our wholesale business. And what we did was, okay, we looked at how do we change the digital landscape, how do we take digital transformation, but ultimately it's talking about changing our mindset, changing the culture. And Spotify, I'm sure everyone's used Spotify before, and I'll talk a little bit more around that a little bit later, but this was I'm not going to go through the whole diagram, but it is really interesting. Again, it's another engineering mindset approaching a problem around streaming and how they disrupted the streaming market or the music streaming business. And how did they do that? Well, they reorganized. They looked at each feature, each change that might happen on the app. So if you've got Spotify, when you launch it the next day or even every week, there's a change, but you don't really know about it. The customer experience is incredible on Spotify. There's always a new feature that somebody from that team is delivering. And they broke that down into small teams, cross silos, no more silos, looking at things in a much different way, releasing features, releasing ideas very, very quickly. And that was done in 2014. So this paper is also publicly available from the engineering team from Henrik. Can't read that surname, unfortunately, from here. And it's a great paper if you wanted to see how they approached that. And again, I think that has a lot of synergy in terms of how we approach things with SG Markets, where we revisited our global markets platform, our trading platform, which I'm responsible for. We re-engineered how do we do things, how do we approach things, how do we get stakeholders, how do we change the way we do things and implement that. And that started for us 2015. We migrated all our assets by 2019, and now we've got a very successful business and franchise within the execution part of SG Markets. So we've also got to be able to look outside of banking. I think we have this notion of, I've talked about people with skills and having experience within the banks, and not forgetting that and making sure we leverage that. But also we need to look outside, and sometimes we need to get reference points, understand what's going on with other markets. And I've highlighted 3 partnerships we have here. I'm actually a digital trustee for Streets of Growth. I'm a governor at University of Chichester, and that's the reason why I brought them up. So Streets of Growth it works in Shadwell, works in Tower Hamlets, so just across the road. They work with very disadvantaged youth who are either being coerced into gangs or about to be coerced into gangs or in trouble once they're in there. And as you can imagine with COVID, their way of working was to be literally on the streets and working with the young people in that space. We rapidly set up a digital platform for them. We got them mobile distributed in terms of all the laptops that they needed, mobile devices, case management tools. We set that up in record time. Before it was a challenge. We couldn't do that for a number of reasons, but COVID clearly showed that you can do that. And I think the analogy there for us in banking is that we've seen how relationships and the way we had relationships, relationship managers and clients has changed. Now we're seeing a lot more uptake of the platforms and the tooling that we had within SG Markets. We've seen the growth of that with our clients, but also with our salespeople and our relationship managers to be able to talk and communicate, as well as doing the normal face-to-face with how can we come up with an investment solution, how can we help you with a pre-trade idea, can we share some analytics before the meeting actually happens, and being able to do that in a digital fashion. Again, it sounds obvious, but these are the kind of synergies and analogies that we're trying to find. And with Chichester, that was a top 50 placed uni. It's now top 20, which is great. But again, my focus on that was very much around their digital platform and their technology park as well. They've got a phenomenal digital park down in Bognor Regis, of all places, which is another challenged area in the UK. It's on the south coast, so it impacts white, lower working class males particularly. They're very much impacted by the coast changes that happen there on a seasonal basis. And now that's top 20. But the focus on that really was how do we develop new courses, new ideas. Key area was NHS and delivering NHS nursing, but building out digital applications. So VR, virtual reality, you couldn't do face-to-face anymore. You had to do it remotely from the building in order to get other people trained up within the NHS area within the South Coast. Esports, e-gaming, another great big area in which people were able to work remotely. And then the computing department and moving that to more modern technologies and focus on data and AI. And really, from those two areas, we picked up, it's a data play, right? And again, Sapphire mentioned that before. Actually, I should be a Sapphire salesman the amount of time that I'm talking about them. But they talked about data and how important that is. It's fundamental, right? We cannot take anything forward without understanding the data and how we're going to use it and how we're going to be able to use it. We've also sponsored a number of hackathons previously. We were one of the first investment banks in the UK to sponsor City Hackathon, King's Hackathon a number of years ago, where we worked with students, because it was fascinating to see, when we talk about the Spotify example, how they were working, how they were doing things. And it's very rapid. Take an API, take a robot, build something within 24 hours. It's an amazing experience, and I think we certainly learned from that, and my team certainly learned from that as well as the SocGen. So we're now sponsoring UCL Fintech. That's going to give us an insight into, again, what students are looking for, but also what tooling, what ideas they have, and how we can kind of encourage development platforms and programs with other universities as well. And it's more student-led rather than directly with the university. So that leads to data. I talked about data, and I can't emphasize enough how important data is for us as a strategy. It's going to be a strong pillar of our 2025 strategy, which will be announced pretty shortly. Claire Calmejane is the Group Chief Innovation Officer, so I work with her and her team quite closely. And that's a pretty straightforward statement around data. Being a data-driven company, making the data available to everybody in the firm, but also to fintech partners as well in the future, as we do now with our analytics platform for our pre-trade clients. The purpose of all these images is a change of language. So before, people were talking about, again, I'm not going to name them again, but we talked about emails, spreadsheets. We're trying to move away from emails and spreadsheets and think about, how do we automate our workflow? How do we automate the messaging that we want to get back to clients? The same message that goes from sales, from operations, legal, compliance. They've all got to have the same data. They've all got to understand what's going on with our client, not just the relationship manager. And it's a change of approach, you need to understand the data, you need to be able to analyze the data, you need to do some analytics and get some insights in that. You need to see what the opportunity may be in terms of either a self-service efficiency play for the client or an investment idea for a client as well. And having those tools and having those capabilities with everyone in the organization is key. And we're doing a big training program. We've got a lot of people trained up on these tools. We've also contributed to open source with our AI kit for the machine learning tools as well. So we're big supporters of open source platforms within the firm as well. Partnerships. So what does this mean in terms of fintechs, as we're here on Fintech Live? So we already partner in the UK with a number of players. I haven't named all of them, but the typical ones are Fintech, Accenture, PwC, etc. But we have our own internal Fintech hubs as well. Global Markets Incubator is a partnership that we have with our global markets team in Paris, and we're looking to develop the number of B2B partners here in the UK to plug into a number of ideas that we've got. And this is all use case driven. So just to clarify, this is not just innovation coming up with the idea. It's coming directly from the business or from our service units or support units who come up with an idea. If we can't find a solution in-house, we tend to look outside to see if there's a solution there that we can leverage off. And we're leveraging off all our assets that are already talking to fintechs already, whether that be on the group innovation perspective with our Startup Flow platform or with our global markets partners as well. And the key thing is APIs. I haven't really talked too much about that, but we're API driven. We've got thousands of APIs. Some of them are more mature than others. But for us to not necessarily plug and play, but be able to integrate with a fintech, to be able to start up a project relatively quickly, we can do that. And it's always supported. We always have a strong stakeholder behind that before we even engage with a fintech. So it's important for us. We want to make sure that the fintech also feels that they're having an honest and open and close relationship and partnership feeling with SocGen. So while we're talking about fintech, we're going to have some topics on ESG and diversity as well. It's an important subject for me personally, for obvious reasons. We launched a BAME network, which we renamed as BME. A couple of ladies running that are doing a fantastic job. And what I like about the BME phrase is it rhymes with me in terms of be me, see me. And I think that's a big problem that we have in this space. If you don't see me, how are you going to be able to think that you can make a change or get better representation. And this is just a stat from the Atomico report that comes out every year. It's got lots of different data sources. It's not just them. So you can see here data from Deal Room, from another partner as well. And it's obvious. So you can see the difference, marked difference, both from a gender perspective and also from an ethnic diversity perspective. And that's something that we need to address as an industry in terms of how do we rebalance that? What do we do to make change, a real change around that, not gestures? We want to see action, right? This is a topic that I've seen discussed for 20, 30 years since I left university. So for me, it's about action. And this is quite clear when we have challenges around why should we change? Well, that's obvious. And I think we'll be talking about this later in the panel as well. So a little bit about the future. I'm sure you've seen these articles. We already had blockchain was already mentioned today. DeFi is another area as well that was also brought up by The Economist. I think the last article they were talking 3 areas, one about changes that they see in the future. Payments is an obvious one, so I think there's some conversations around M-Pesa. Everybody may have come across M-Pesa before, but the digital payments platforms and how they're changing and how digital currency, Facebook have just made an announcement with their platform as well, following on from Libra, from a payment structure. And we see those changes from a transaction management, cash management perspective on a B2B level. And that's important to understand that. I think the other areas they were talking about were digital currencies, so CDBCs, and lastly was DeFi. And in that space, we set up an internal startup call program about 2 years ago, 3 years ago actually, and what came out of that was Forge. So Forge is a dedicated unit within SG that is focused on digital assets, digital tokenization, CDBC. So we've already got some relationships already started with Banque de France, and I'm sure we can leverage that knowledge for some of the initiatives that are going on in the UK as well. And we also had a paper that was submitted through Forge, I think last week or a couple of weeks ago, with MakerDAO to see how we could look at collateralization of fiat and DeFi currencies and what that might look like. So this is very much an experimentation phase, but it's great to have that opportunity within a bank to look at these topics. So I guess is the future. It's happening now. And going back to my topics that I mentioned around gaming, around music, some of these things. So Axie Infinity, I'm not going to talk about capital market caps or anything like that, but the user base on Axie Infinity, is, if you've not heard of it, is a play-to-earn gaming platform on blockchain. There are around, I think, 1.8 million active users on that platform already, and their cryptocurrency price has kind of gone through the roof. But like I said, that's not really the point I'm making here. The fact that you can play a game, you can earn from playing that game, you can earn tokens is fascinating, and it's being used right now. So I think we have more use cases in this space than we probably did with blockchain, even though that we've got some partnerships on the blockchain side with, particularly on the trade finance area. The other one is Mirror. So Mirror is for creators or writers. They're able to submit ideas or publications and not have a middle person involved in that. That's supported by the community, and you're able to earn tokens, and you get that funding directly. Another one that's really grown rapidly in the last few months. And the last one, just going back to the Spotify example, so Audius is a decentralized music streaming platform supported by the likes of Nas. If you've heard of him, he invested in Coinbase 5 years ago, so he did very well in terms of that investment. Katy Perry's also, I think, an investor in that as well. And that's grown. I think that has 1 million people, more than, 1 million active client people using that platform as well, where they are publishing their music and then getting funding for production and then for events as well. So I think, in terms of truism, in terms of what's going on in this space, I think these are ones to watch, particularly on the DeFi space. Not necessarily particularly on a B2B side, but I think we will see new markets developing, new approaches developing quite quickly in this space. So the future belongs to those who prepare for it today. That's a really important statement that I take and the team take as well. And that's the end of my presentation. So hopefully that was within the 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Sohail. I wasn't expecting to hear Katy Perry and Nas mentioned on stage today, so that's how we roll here.
That's important to look at the outside world.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, I do have some questions here. Any questions from the floor before I kick into these? Okay. If at any stage, I will come back to the floor again if anyone does have any questions. Okay, I've got quite a few questions that have come in for you, actually, Sohail. So kicking off here, how is the surge in digitalization changing the culture in banking?
I think I covered that, but just to expand a little bit on that one, it's changed a lot. Like I said, we're trying to break down, even within the firm, the approach of a siloed approach, and I talked about the integrated view of our client. That can only happen if the organization is integrated as well, or has an integrated mindset. Forget about the cultural change. If you're saying we're approaching client X, we're going to be offering them trade finance, cash management, and a global markets option, and it needs to be denominated in US dollars, but we need to backdate it with a currency from North Africa, which is also a great franchise that we have. We need to be able to act as one team, as one organization, as one unit when we go back to the clients. It's nothing to do with digital transformation. It's kind of a cultural change that needs to happen. I think we've done a good job. There's still a way to go.
Okay. And you talked about representation in the presentation there. How can fintech improve its visibility?
I think that's the question, right? I don't know the answer. I think the challenge we have is that we're looking at, one of our challenges for ESG, for example, we've stated that we want 30% of GBiz management, the wholesale market management, to be female, right? That's a real target that we're working towards. It's good having targets, and you can look at the NFL space when they had targets around managers, for example, coaches. That was done 20 years ago. They had 3 coaches that were from an ethnic black background. They still only have 3 black coaches. That's 20 years after something was forced. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I think it's more around developing rather than numbers. It's kind of saying, yes, we know it's an obvious challenge, but if you don't develop the pool and don't develop people to be in those kind of roles, and also the culture of the organization has to change as well. The culture of the organization is going to remain as is. You're only going to bring in people who have the same mindset, same approach. So it doesn't really matter. You're not really adding in diversity. So diversity has to also reflect the change in clients, change in the behavior of clients as well, which we're seeing quite a bit of change as well.
Okay, and as you mentioned earlier, you are going to be on our panel at 12:30
right.
Discussing sustainability, and we will talk about some of these issues again. So I do have some questions relating to that that's probably better to say.
Yeah, sure.
But how do you leverage your fintech partners to enhance the organisation?
So again, I think I cover that as well, but I think it's about partnerships also internally, not just externally. So we're leveraging off the relationships that our other units within the organization have already. And like I said, I think we're very much trying to build out a sandbox environment, and we do that already for our analytics business, particularly around the data play. And we're looking to expand that for our post-trade as well as execution platforms as well going forward. So I think it's an API and giving access as well. And again, it's something that universities are asking for as well, that they want a subset of data, consume it, and help build some of their startups as well.
And you mentioned a couple of times Spotify there.
Yeah.
You talked about agility.
Yeah.
How agile do you think SG is? I mean, is it too big to have that agility of a sort of startup?
Well, I think that's why I did the super tanker, right? Kind of approach. The reality is where we are, and revenues and the business is still there, right? So we still have a lot of our clients still wanting to trade and interact with us on the existing rails, right? That hasn't changed. The other day, somebody came up to me and said, we're going to write an AI program for an MT150 message. I went, seriously? I mean, that doesn't really excite me, but the reality is that we've got, that historical framework. We call them legacy, but actually they're value. I see them as value. It's not a negative. We just need to find a way to use it and work with it. So if you turn around to somebody and say, the messaging platform we're using is not fit for purpose, you switch people off. It's got to be, it's fit for purpose because it does this. In order to offer it to a client, we need to extend it to do this, or we need to find an alternative solution in parallel. So it's having that dialogue and not saying it's an all or nothing scenario.
Okay, last chance. Yes, questions. Excellent. Could we get a microphone down here? If you can just start by stating your name and the organisation you're from, please.
Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. My name is Roberto Marantidis. I'm a managing director at Alantra in advisory. So I have two questions. One is in relation to digital assets. Do you currently hold or act as a custodian to them? And if not, what's the vision for actually doing that as a bank,
right,
let's say? And the second question is in relation to your interaction with the fintech ecosystem. do you see a transition between the partnership model to more acquisitions down the line, or is that kind of a longer term thing? How are you thinking about that as a bank?
Sure. Thanks for the questions. So I think on the first part, we don't do custodianship at the moment. It doesn't mean that we won't do it. It's going to be driven by client demand. And our team on the security services side are looking into that already with some of our internal kind of initiatives as well. The second question was related to, our partnership. Yeah. So we already have made investments with some fintechs, particularly on the retail play, banking as a service with Trezor, and a couple of others. I can't remember who they are right now, but the innovation team with Claire and her team have made some great strides in that space. On the B2B side, we're looking at the moment in terms of adding solutions to our existing platform, but there's no reason as to say why we wouldn't do it. WeTrade is another example of where we've invested as well, which is a B2B play for equities and I think FX, or fixed income, with fixed income products. We're on the equity side, and I think JP Morgan's on the fixed income side, and that goes to trade finance clients.
Okay, thank you for your questions. That's all we've got time for now. So big thank you to Sohail.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Let's take that. Thank you.